Yeah, but I think it still does.
You sit by the door. I would love to sit by the door. Not covering the door completely. Turn around and face me.
That's usually my attitude. Oh, no problem.
No, I don't want dark glasses.
Kids usually when they're supposed to have 10, 15 maybe.
Someday when like Phil shows them, I'll put some on.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. My sister's been out here. She's like people by grave. We finally got, we went, there's a nice little museum. That's the one. Let's see, the woman that runs the restaurant. We went there the other day with my son.
In Fairfield or where?
No, we live in a little town south of Mount Pleasant.
Oh, okay.
I've been here for a long time. I've been back for
Now, you know Norma Lang.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
my second time.
Yeah, my very good friend. We taught school together.
Small world. Everybody's an outboard down here.
No.
I happened to be over the parsonage one day you called. And sure.
I gotta say everybody else got it.
Many of us here have tied to the pioneers that were here. I see some faces in the audience that I know for sure do have ties here. And so it's very meaningful. This chapel is called a historic shrine now, and for many of us, that is just a say 150 years ago, and I think that I've been coming here for half of that. And my grandparents were in on the first half. They came here in they were members in 1871. They joined this church. And after that, they moved south of Lockridge, about 6 miles, and the Upland Church was formed from this church in 1878. So they were charter members of the Upland Church, and there was a colony of Swedes out there. And they had a yoke ministry. And my father walked over, as did others, when the occasion came to go to confirmation. And I had his confirmation certificate in this church. And they served, the minister served both churches. So when you think about it, do you wonder, what it was like here 150 years ago? I sort of wonder about that. I think the terrain is probably a lot the same. As I say, I've been here for half of it, and the terrain hasn't changed much since I've been here. When you look out over the valley, there are less trees now than I'm sure there were then. And of course, the road has been gravelled. I remember when it was a mud road or a dirt road out here. Well, the Swedes established this, the immigrants did, in 1848. And there was a log church down here, I believe, in this corner somewhere is where the log church was first. And then this church, with more Swedish immigrants coming, this church became larger. There's not enough room in the log church. So in 1860, they paid about $6 in that neighborhood for an acre of ground here. And they began to build this church. And a little bit ahead of that, they had ministers that came from Sweden, and different ministers that came. And some of them were Methodists, and some Baptists. And they broke off from this church, this congregation, and they went west and established the church up here, the Methodist church that is just west of us. And I believe that was established a little bit before 1860, or just about that church was established. So when you think of it, as they were tonight, I think maybe it was much like it is today. This church is certainly a beautiful building. It was well built. The altar, it was handmade. The hymn board was handmade. I don't know the real story about the picture. There have been several stories about it. My father said that that picture, or mural, I guess it isn't a mural because it really isn't on the wall. It's framed on it. Was painted for another church. And there was some kind of a flaw in it. So they met and they were offered to purchase this picture, and they did that. So this picture was purchased at a little later date. Now, if any of the rest of you know another story about that picture, do any of you know any other story about that picture?
Ernest Aronson did it. The last, while he was still living, that's been many years ago now. Just figured out, gave it over.
Ernest Aronson, I thought that.
Artist that lived here.
Yes.
He was a painter.
Uh-huh.
He was a good artist.
So he painted it.
He did, he just went over.
He went over it.
His,
And tinted. I see.
He did his job.
And then, of course, the story about the organ. The organ is hand-built, and it is made of wood, and it has a single manual on it, and 4 stops, and it has a push-type pedal that the old organs had. The pedals have no tone to them, it's just for volume. And I played that organ for the 100th anniversary when they celebrated the centennial out here for the order of service. And then another lady had a solo on it because some of her relation had helped build the organ. But one of my memories of playing that organ many times is that Emil Quick, who's Barbara Burgermaster's grandfather, always pumped it for me. And it has a leather bellows, and he would stand right back of it and pump it just as though you were pumping from a well, and that's how you got the power and the sound. And if he ever let up, it would go, ooh. And then another thing about the building that is unusual and beautiful is the woodwork. The wainscoting around here was all done by the immigrants, the Swedes, and the ceiling and the star and the light fixtures have oil lamps in them, and they were electrified back in the 40s. And then, of course, the balcony is a delight for the children. And I think they said that that is black walnut back there, the balcony itself, the front of it is black walnut. So they certainly did a good job. And then the stoves, and I remember when the pipes hung up here, and that's what those big hooks are for, are the pipes to hold the stove, to hold up so they don't come tumbling down. So there are many things about this building, and to think that it is still standing and still in good shape is due to a labor of love of many, many people. Many through our congregation have devoted so much time to work at this church. And then many people who have had ancestors here have given money to maintain this church. So now, as they say, it is a shrine, a historic shrine, and we are still privileged after all these years to be able to come here and worship. We still have services here twice a year from our church, and then Swedesburg comes out here and has a service also. So we'll go on with our program now, and the first part of the program will be Barbara Burgermaster, Barbara Smith Burgermaster. Barbara's works came from here. And, I remember one of the things I came to this church long ago was the wedding of her parents. I was a young child, and let me tell you, that wedding was in here, and at that time it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And so Barbara is going to sing to us in Swedish, and she will tell you about her songs.
I was baptized here. This is a special place for me. My aunt, Florence Quick Boyd, lived across the street. They were caretakers here. And we would come to their house on Sunday afternoon and have chicken dinners, and then us kids would come over here and play church. It was a holy place, and it helped to form us, our spiritual lives. It truly did. Missionary preacher. I'm going to sing two numbers. Thy Holy Wings is in the blue with one voice hymnal that some of you perhaps are familiar with. And then, of course, Children of the Heavenly Father, you all know that. So, I don't really know the Swedish language very well, so some of you can certainly correct me on my Swedish, but I'll give it a try.
Bethany Lutheran in Burlington. And Charlene and also Barbara are both graduates of Augustana. So Augustana is well represented tonight. And what makes it, what makes it so great tonight is that he is the son and she is the daughter-in-law of the Engstroms. And the Engstroms came here, I believe, in 46. And Pastor Engstrom was the first minister here. You see, we used to be New Sweden, Salina, and Trinity of Lockridge. Then Salina broke away, and then it was New Sweden, then Lockridge. Then New Sweden broke away because we had to get ministers all the time coming down, lay ministers, public supplies and everything. It was just too much. So then in 1946, about, or 45, Trinity of Lockridge and this New Sweden congregation united, and we became, that's how we became First Augustana. It was Trinity and New Sweden. And Pastor Engstrom was the first one that was the minister then in 1946, and he was here 6 or 7 years. And that was a wonderful time. I think perhaps that was a heyday of our church for the young people. It was after the war, and we were back, and my age, we were all starting out, you know, with families and anew, and also the Engstroms, and Myrtle was the perfect example of a minister's wife, and we had a wonderful time. We really had a great time. And the
They're a
church
role
really
model for me, I'll tell you.
Well, all this, so last year, you noticed them before, and I'm introducing really Charlene. So I better turn it over to Charlene.
What an honor. It seems so interesting to me that a lady who's 100% Czechoslovakian would be standing in front of you. I know not one word of Swedish, but I did marry into one of the most wonderful families I've ever met, and that is Dick and Marie Langstrom's family, and married one of their 3 sons, their eldest, the one that was born here while they served here, and his name is Carl. Carl and I were asked, just a few days before we left for our family reunion vacation, if we could perhaps help out tonight, because some of the other people who had hoped to be here were going to not be able to be here. So Carl and I said we would do that, and then we went bye-bye, and we left for 10 days. So we're kind of winging it, but we're happy to be here. We'd like to start out by singing together. I love to tell the story, which in your red book you'll find on page 326. 326. Now you're going to say, but wait a minute, this isn't a Swedish hymn. Well, it's not a Swedish hymn, but we all adore this song. And I remember singing it even in a little Presbyterian Czechoslovakia, and always loving it. And so we decided we would start that. And I think Carl's couple words, something about this one? No, it's okay. Some of the hymns, our church loves to do hymn sings, and so about once or twice a year we do that, and Carl's a wonderful book where he has found lots of wonderful information. So along the way we have some time to share with us. I love to tell the story. Let's all begin in verse 1. of my Swedish songs. And this is the Swedish folk. You see that right above the song. So this is authentic. And let's see. We have 4 verses. Let's do just 2, so we have a chance to sample lots of things. We'll do verse 1, and then we'll do verse. All right. Let's do verse 1.
This hymn was published in a Swedish periodical edited by Mr. Berggren, a school teacher in Kalmar in Sweden. The text was credited originally to a German author, but it is also thought to be attributed to some Swedish persons as well, and appeared in the Andliga Sånger Verbarn, which I learned as being song for children. I don't know what the first word means. Andliga, who knows what that means? Who knows if I'm saying it right? Probably not. And although it's a German folk melody, it was used in many Swedish and North American hymnals and was written for our Lutheran Book of Worship for singing out the SPA, but by Joel Lundin, who composed it and rewrote it, and Joel Lundin from Augustana College.
Besides Barbie and Harley, is also a graduate in Merlin School of
Bryan is
And Bryan.
We'll get to Bryan later.
Brother Norman and our 2 children, 2 of our 3 children are Augie grads. So it's been really fun.
So we will sing, sing all 3 verses when Christmas morn is gone.
And we're going to have the men sing verse 1 this time, and ladies will sing verse 2, and then we'll all sing verse 3.
Amen.
lead to beneath the cross of Jesus. Oh, I just know that it was probably written about the late 1800s. Okay, let's start. Raise your hand if you were a member of this parish or served in this parish. Oh, guess what? You get a C. Yes. Okay, and then the second verse, for all of those who are 50 years and up young, will sing the second verse, and then we'll all. Okay. How about those of you who Sweden people stand up? Can you stand up for us? Can you see who you are? Those of you who are actual members of the Sweden and Lockridge, or baptized here, or married here, or anything wonderful here. Yeah, right.
Only Ulsters were baptized here, but Cody was one of the last ones baptized here.
Oh, wonderful.
He'll be 10 in December, and he was baptized when he was 6 months old. So.
Would you come up so we can give you a hand? This gentleman is the last one down. Praise the Savior now and ever. 104. This is a Swedish hymn also, but it's based on a Latin text. And the information column I found said that it was in the choral book, K-O-R-A-L-B-O-K, choral book, in 1697. All right, praise the 104. Let's, which
share some music with us with some more Swedish roots. First, I want to introduce Pastor Arnold Nelson. Pastor Nelson's been a Lutheran pastor for 54 years, serving town and country pastorates for 18 years in Illinois, in Iowa, and Nebraska. He served Salem Lutheran Church in Omaha for 15 years as assistant pastor in a few other city congregations. He married Ethel M. Barr, librarian in Ventura, California, during his past post-internship year of 1943. Their son, Bryan Keith, is the third of their three sons. Bryan is the director of music in the East Moline First Presbyterian Church, a graduate of, where else? Augustana College. 2 degrees in music, and for the past 12 years has been a member of the a cappella Nova Singers, if any of you have heard them, of Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois. Do a lot of things I know at, now the name is at Bishop's Hill. Do a number of things, Bishop's Hill, other places around this area, Quad City and Tri-State area. So you're going to say a few words first, Pastor Nelson.
Thank you. Good to see you. I was in the Munderville Church at the time that Pastor Engstrom was called here, and I was just a year ahead of him. Actually, he was ahead of me, because I didn't come to Munderville until 1952. Munderville is named after a lay person, like most of you are. Magnus Munder became a professional teacher in Sweden in 1842, when compulsory education was guaranteed free for all children in 1842, and he applied, and his pastor recommended him as a teacher, and for many years, until 1853, he taught Swedish children in Sweden, and he had a good reputation. Erland Carlson, the first pastor of the Augustana Church in Chicago, heard about him and called him to be his helper in teaching the Swedish children in Chicagoland. So the cities and towns that Magnus Munder taught him were Chicago, first Swedish teacher, professional Swedish teacher in Rockford, Illinois, in West Point, Indiana, Attica, Indiana, Montmorency, Indiana, and a couple other places in Indiana, including Lafayette. Then in 1858, Magnus Munder was called to teach school in Galesburg under Dr. Hasselquist. Dr. Hasselquist told Magnus that he should go back to Chicago and help Erland Carlson, but at that time, Chicago was having a real tough time. And Magnus had this feeling he should go west. He heard about Håkan Olson. Håkan Olson had come here in 1857 as a colporteur. In 1858, he received a license to preach under Dr. Hasselquist. And in 1859, Håkan Olson was given a call from a New Sweden church and accepted the call on condition that he would be ordained. He was ordained at the first synod of Augustana, Scandinavian Lutheran Church in 1860 in Wisconsin. On the Sunday he was ordained, Magnus Munder preached a sermon here. Magnus Munder took 5 different jobs. Actually, he was elected to 5 different jobs while he was here. First, he was to be the organist. He used to be the psalm leader. He had a beautiful baritone voice and a clear voice. He was to be the teacher of the children. He was to be a secretary of the congregation and anything else that the pastor wanted him to do. His ability to read sermons, everybody could hear him. Even the deaf people could hear him because he had such a clear voice. And I was privileged to be pastor of 2 of his students, Magnus Munder's students, when I was in Munderville. They said Magnus Munder spoke clearly and we learned. clearly what we were supposed to learn. He was a strict teacher, but we did learn what we were to learn. In 1870, the United States Census lists Magnus Munder as a teacher of music. And he taught not only people in the Munderville area, but whatever he was teaching these schools. So 3 of the organists in the First Lutheran Church in the town came from Munderville and performed. Mrs. Kinblade was the lady still living and lived to be over 100. Was in the Munderville parish when I was there. She told me about Magnus Munder. One other lady did too. Now, I'm interested in Magnus Munder, and I've written a biography of Magnus Munder, which someday maybe you'll get a chance to read in one of the papers. Magnus Munder had a favorite hymn, 146 in your hymnal, and Bryan is going to sing that hymn. Magnus Munder had a feeling that his home, he traveled often to Sweden, teaching in homes before there were any schools built, and he taught in schools that were built. He was the first teacher in the school that became the first home of Augustana College and Seminary in Chicago. His wife and daughter lived in the apartment upstairs. Now, hymn 146 is Magnus's favorite hymn in Swedish. Himmelen I himmelen is the name in Swedish, but Bryan's going to sing it in English.
Just a couple of words to tie some things together before I sing. As was pointed out, I'm a Augustana Lutheran sojourning now among the Presbyterians, so we kind of have a reverse. One other tie to the Engstrom family, of course, was that I went to Augustana with your brother Norman, and in fact, we were in the same fraternity where he was my big brother, so I guess I am, at least by connection, that connection, I'm a member of the Engstrom family. But this is a song that I grew up loving, and I'll sing it in the translation that was used in the service book and hymnal. It has been retranslated, or a different translation for the Lutheran Book of Worship. But In Heaven Above has always been one of my favorites as well.
Which tune?
If you would play the second tune. Right, which is Norwegian, so we'll be pan-Scandinavian here.
Norwegian, now we're going to stray to Danish a bit. But that's close.
In the first Augustana synod, it was Augustana's Scandinavian because they included the Norwegians, and the first church.
They included the Norwegians and Danes just out of the greatness of their heart.
You remember that it was Augustana, not Swedish, so it was Augustana Scandinavian.
Beware of those who are Danes and Norwegians, and if any of those from Augustana met a Vix, just like them.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, this was really a hymn that was a favorite among Scandinavian Christians. Originally it had 7 verses, but only 5 of those verses remained in the hymn. It was written by Nikolai Grundtvig, great Danish hymn writer of the 19th century. He was the son of a Lutheran pastor in Denmark. Later, when his father became ill, he asked Nikolai to come to assist him in his church. And in his trial sermon for his ordination, his sermon contained such scorching charges against some of his fellow theologians that he was reprimanded and his ordination was postponed. This led to a temporary nervous collapse. He was finally ordained in 1811, but for 10 years was a pastor without a parish, was not even permitted to confirm his own children. As time went on, he gained popularity, not only by his preaching, but also by his hymn writing and his poetry. He was fully reinstated and appointed pastor in Vartov. He became a champion of the movement to raise the intellectual standards of the Danish people, and so he helped to establish folk schools. And these schools spread quickly in Denmark and also to Sweden and Finland and Norway, so that Grundtvig became known as the father of the public school in Scandinavia. After 50 years in the ministry, he was appointed bishop by the King of Denmark. An interesting side note is that the music that we have, the hymn text, it was written by Pastor Fred C.M. Hansen. Pastor Hansen served the Danish Evangelical Lutheran Church in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Council Bluffs, Iowa, and Audubon, Iowa. During his pastorate in Audubon, he helped found the Lutheran Bible camp at Lake Okoboji, and also served as president of the Iowa district of the United Evangelical Lutheran Church from 1939 to 1943. And so we've got some Iowa ties to this hymn as well as some Scandinavian ties. Let's sing the first verse and the last verse, verse 1 and 5, built on a rock, number 151.
the young and then of course myself.
I'll try to sing it. I don't think I know the melody very well.
version number 231. This is really an English hymn, and it was written for the children of England and for the children of a parish that was served by writers, Sapiens, Baring Bulls. But it is also one that is written for the evening, beautiful, peaceful, moving hymn. I thought of it as in the Augustana choir that sang. There's one that we like to do often. Now the day is over. There's just 3 short verses. Why don't we stand as we sing 231 now?
For approximately 35 years, had a father, naturally. His father was a friend of Magnus Munder, and he's about 20 years younger than Magnus Munder. His name was Anderson at first, but he changed it to Andrain when he came to this country. Andreas Andrain was a tailor by trade, and there were many people that he clothed before he became a pastor. He became a pastor in 1856, being ordained, I believe, in Dixon, Illinois, and went on to raise a family of 9 children, and he married a second time after his first wife had died. First wife left him with 8 children, and the widow of Dr. Esbjörn, who was the first ordained pastor to come to the United States to serve Swedish Lutherans, came on his own. There were Swedish pastors in Delaware, but they had been sent by the government to be pastors in the state of Delaware, which was under Swedish control until the Dutch took over. Well, I've been rambling on here, but I'm still writing the biography of Magnus Munder, and when it gets ready, why, I'm sure you'll have that in your museum also. It's a fascinating study. just came across some new material this last week, so it's still growing. And now that I'm here for this celebration, I missed the one in the 40s because I had 2 churches in Illinois and I just couldn't get away. But I was here a couple years ago when the first celebration took place over in New Sweden, and I wouldn't miss this for anything. Thank you.
I think maybe you're a little older than I am.
Hey, I'm 83.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm 82 today.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Emerson. Happy birthday to you.
I'm not a speech maker, and I'm a little nervous.
Just tell a story.
All right. If I told all the stories I know about New Sweden and that community, we'd stay here till 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
Thank you.
But over here on the wall, you'll see a map of the United States. It was printed in 1848. I found the map when I was just a boy, after my grandfather passed away, who was one of the first settlers of New Sweden. His father drowned in Brush Creek shortly after they got here from Sweden. But anyway, somehow or other, this map was saved by putting it in a book. After my grandfather's death, I found the map in that book, and I've had it ever since. So I have it for frame. It was printed in 1848. And I assume that my great-grandfather carried the map as they came into this country from Sweden. Over on the table, there's a Bible that was printed in Stockholm in 1836. My grandfather's wife, her name was Anderson, and they lived close to New Sweden. They also came from Sweden, and I assume they came about the same time. Well, her parents carried that Bible from Sweden. So that's what I have to say about myself. And my wife and I were married in New Sweden. And Dick Engstrom, I have a lot of, I tell you, love for him. When he came to Lockridge, he had a board at our house. He roomed at our house in Fairfield. Because we were members at Lockridge, but we lived in Fairfield, and Dick Engstrom had a room with us. So we have a lot of knowledge about his time here, of course, which is good to reminisce about. And it's been great today. So with that, I'll give this to somebody.
God bless you.
Barbara.
Well, Dad says he's from New Sweden area, and the Smithburgs and the Quicks sort of merged out there, and so I guess we're from New Sweden too. That's pretty close to the New Sweden clay. Carl, I don't know, do you remember how good those Maid-Rites were we ate out of the kitchen window that time? 1948, I think I was a year old. Where'd Carl go? Do you remember those?
No, I don't. You have some more?
I remember a lot of good meals out that area. My Aunt Florence Boyd, she was a Quick, Mom's sister. They lived in the parsonage, and one of the things that I remember, her husband, who's still living, he's in a care home in Atumwa, Webster Boyd. A lot of you know Webster Boyd. He electrified the church. I remember that was one thing that hadn't been brought up this time around. Barbara mentioned last night we used to play church and pump the organ, and I think, who was it that said they played the organ? And our grandfather pumped the bellows. I can't remember. That was Kathleen. Okay. Been up in the bell tower. If you want a really good view of New Sweden, you should go up in the bell tower someday and open those doors, because you can really see then. but that's a nice view. Lots of memories all over the whole country out here. Wagner's and the Lutheran Church in Lockridge. Pastor Engstrom baptized me. I don't remember him living at our house, but I was pretty young. Was I born yet? That was right in that area. So, several other things that I've been real interested in is this history out here. And I've been accumulating a lot of the Smithburg history and quite a bit of the Quick history. We're trying to write it down, write a lot of the stories down. So we're finding out a lot of different things and how family members and friends 30, 40, 50 years ago, generations ago, were really closely connected. And this Swede thing, I know Swan Martin over here, and Fern, she was an Aronson, and her, let's see now, if I can get this right, your mother was a Carlson. That's right, isn't it? So Norris and Vincent Carlson were related to Fern, and her brother Alton lives in Davenport. He's married to one of my cousins on Dad's sister's, one of her daughters. He said his dad always said, oh, you just well give up on trying to tell who's who, and these Swedes are all mixed together, so he's right. I'll turn it over to Barbara. She's going to tell you about what she found out in Sweden, I think.
No.
No?
I just had a memory I wanted to share. We have an older sister that's 3 years older than me, and Joanne was a good little girl. And then I came along, and I was a wiggle worm. And our Aunt Marie was kind of like a second mother. She never married, and so she was just the dear lady, extra lady in our home that helped to nurture and love us. And she always just kind of shook her head about Barbara. Do you remember the old seats at First Augustana? We were like theater seats, and the seat went up. Well, as a little toddler, I was always getting caught in those seats. And that's one of my early remembrances of Lockridge, was those silly seats, and I'd get my legs caught in them. And Aunt Marie would shake her head and she'd say, oh, Barbara, you just can't sit still. But another memory I have is the missionaries that used to come and share stories about Africa. And they helped to plant seeds within us as little girls about the ministry across the world. And I just must share that because of those early seeds that were planted, my sister is now a missionary. She felt the call when she was 8 years old, and she did not answer that call. But in her 50s, now she is answering that call. So thank you again to Lockridge and what you did. Oh, I remember Sunday school in the basement and those little red books. I can't remember names of teachers. Can any of you help me? Who was some of the ladies that were teachers in the 40s and 50s? You were one. You were one of my teachers, Mrs. George. And singing the B-I-B-L-E and Benny Cometh, and oh, there were some great songs. So thanks for all your early giving.
Actually, my wife sent me up to get some dessert, but this is the only gracious way to do it, I guess. Looking like I'm really hungry or something like that. I'm Carl Engstrom, the oldest of the three Engstrom boys. I was 5 when we moved away from here. So there aren't a lot of things as a youngster I remember, but we did, oh thank you Dennis. I do remember Dennis was always getting me into trouble. I don't know how he did it, but he was always getting me into trouble. But some very fond memories. I don't know why my mother did a good job of raising me, but she needed a lot of help. So I had a lot of other mothers. Kathleen Bogner was one of my other mothers who I used to, after we moved away, I'd come back and spend a week or two in the summertime every once in a while. And that's when Ben and Dennis and I got into trouble once in a while. And Claudia and Christy Rauscher and a few other people, I don't know who all, but it's amazing to be 5 years old and leave and still have remembrances of these people. There obviously was a wonderful linkage and some wonderful memories. And just moving back into the area, moving to Burlington 5 years ago, it just felt kind of like coming home. You know, it's just, I don't know how that happened. The Lord works in mysterious ways. And all of a sudden I'm back where I was born and baptized and where my roots of faith began, my journey of faith in the church began here among you folks in Lockridge. One of the remembrances that I do have is of the wonderful church dinners. Boy, I'll always remember that. Homemade ice cream and all the fresh food and everything. Hot chicken sandwiches. Do you remember those too? Sure. And the pies that you said we stole, Dennis? What was it? Oh, it was the Maid-Rights that we ate. Whatever. We did have good pies. And so I've taken that with me because now I'm at a church dinner this noon and I'm going to Mediapolis for an ice cream social tonight. So I guess you just don't get away from those church dinners once you get started and that gets in you. Huh? How do I keep my shape? Don't talk about that. But we do have many fond memories. Remember when the parsonage was built, watching those big bulldozers digging a hole in the ground as a 3-year-old, that was very impressive to me.
And remember those rocks? We would take the rocks and we'd ride on the sidewalks.
You probably did that, Barbara. But did you get me in trouble too? Probably. I think so. Is that right? But along with the remembrances of people, I don't remember a lot of things about the church, but I'm also very grateful for the church today. Delighted to be here to celebrate 150 years with you. And as a pastor in the area in the same conference and one who was just dean in the conference for a little while, I'm always impressed by, despite the smallness of the church, the number of leaders that you have, number of people involved in synod work. And always when there's ever a conference meeting, there's more folks from Lockridge than there is from any place else. And you are well represented. So you have a very marvelous commitment to your Lord and your faith, and beyond that, a marvelous commitment to your church. And that's to be commended, and I hope that stays with you forever. God bless. Where's my second mother? I forgot. My other second mother was Bishop Haugen's mother, with whom I lived for a summer before I married Char, my wife, and spent a lot of time with them and their family. So a lot of help you've had, Mom, taking care of me. That's been great. Did you want to talk?
I want to talk because I want to tell something about you. When we had this, I don't know if it was the first or second smorgasbord, but Marie Quick and I would be on the meat committee, and she would come out to my house, and we would make yards and yards of potato sausage and hundreds of meatballs, and sometimes I think we also did the chicken. I'm not quite sure about that. And but Carl was out there just before the smorgasbord because his parents had gone to Chicago to buy the beans and the herring. And maybe something else. We didn't have that at Lockridge. And by that time, my kids weren't too happy about a smorgasbord, and Carl was out there, and they were downstairs. They slept upstairs, but they were downstairs, and they were bouncing around on our bed. And Ben says, "Carl, I don't like smorgasbords. Do you?" And Carl said, "No, I don't." And Ben says, "I think they're wicked." And Carl says, "I think so too." About Ben. This is just the greatest story. We used to go to their house, and that was our experience about going to the country, and we'd ride their horses, and we'd gather their eggs and climb in the haymow, and oh, it was great. And at the end of the day, Ben fell in the hog waller. And we were just ready to get into the car, and she stripped him down and put the hose on him. And here's Black Ben getting bathed by his mother. Oh, that's a laugh. Patty Nelson Glenn now, and we moved back, I say back to the community in 1947 because Dad had been raised in the Salina area, northeast of Salina, but had always gone to the New Sweden Church. And as I sat in the chapel last night singing, I just tingled because I thought, gee, this is where my dad was baptized as a baby and where he was confirmed. We still have his confirmation picture. And I suppose about 1910 or so. He had been born in 94. And so then we came back to live on what was called the Traber place, which had belonged to Dad's sister's family. And of course by then the merger had taken place with New Sweden. So we came over here to Lockridge to the church, and I guess was in Pastor Engstrom's second confirmation class. And I'm still not comfortable saying Dick Engstrom because, you know, I was a 12-year-old and you respected your peers by calling them Mr. or Pastor Engstrom and Mrs. Engstrom and Mrs. Knudsen. And that's just the way it was. I would like to share one thing about Luther League. I think we'd gone to Lake Darling to swim. I'm not sure. I don't know if Don Quick remembers this or not, but and I don't know where we'd done that in the afternoon, and I don't know where we ate some supper, Sunday evening lunch or whatever, because there weren't the fast food restaurants back then. But and I don't know what movie was on at the Co-Ed Theater in Fairfield, but we got to talking, let's go to the movie. Well, you know, there was a lot of antagonism back then of even attending movies, especially a Sunday night movie. And I know we gave Pastor Engstrom some anxious moments and some decisions to make. And I think we did go, and I think he accompanied us. But what I really remember was his comment that said, well, you know, I don't think it's wrong to go to the movie on Sunday night. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are other people who would be hurt by thinking that I did attend the movie on Sunday night. And that has always stuck with me, how it isn't just what we think, but by our actions, we do make a big difference in other people's lives. And I do thank him for that. Dad used to help Webb Boyd. You shared about the Boyds living across from the New Sweden Chapel, and we just lived a little bit northeast, a half a mile. And I can remember being over at the chapel when maybe Dad was helping Webb do something in there, and I'd say, please pump the organ for me. I want to play that organ. And so they would a little while, but because I was taking piano lessons and I didn't know how to play. But of course they were always busy doing whatever they needed to be doing in their chapel. And so it would be just way too brief for me. But I had grand thoughts of playing that organ when I was 12 years old. I would just like to thank again everybody that made this possible. I was not able to be here 2 years ago. And this has been such a great weekend, and I thank you all so very much. And I just praise God that I had the chance to grow up here and be confirmed here at the Lockridge Lutheran Church and was married here. Pastor Knudsen married us. And I've had 42 years of marriage now, and we raised 3 sons. And but I do have to confess to you, I'm a Methodist. But sometimes I tell my Methodist friends, even after these 35 years, I was raised a Lutheran. I'm a Methodist now, but I still have a lot of Lutheran teaching in my heart.
I imagine I am the oldest or one of the oldest members on the books. Maybe not in age, but I've been around a long time. And last night when I gave a little welcome talk, a couple people have told me, well, you didn't say what your name was. And Billingsley, if they knew that, certainly is not Swede. So my name was Linderson. And my family came from out there, my grandfather directly from Sweden. And in that family of 7 children, there were 3 sons. And my father is the only one that stayed here. The oldest son, it was very hard times at that time, and he got on a train here, and he said, I'm going to go as far west as I can to be a carpenter. And my grandfather was a carpenter in Sweden. And so he got on a train and he got to Omaha and he worked for a while. And then he went on to the state of Washington. And he never did come back, which was too bad. He had 4 children and he dropped dead at the age of about 48. So one of his sons came back here several years ago and he took a lot of pictures, and it was his main interest in life to come back here. And then earlier, about in the 1940s, just before the war, another son of his came back. And that is the oldest son, and then my father was the second son, and the youngest son, Edward Linderson, was in Fairfield for many years at the First National Bank. And then he had a chance to open a bank in Clear Lake, Wisconsin. So he went to Clear Lake, and I'm sure the Smithburgs and the Quicks, they were, Aunt Amanda was a Bright, and I know they always used to go to Fairfield and see the Quicks and the Brights. So Uncle Edward always came back about every year, or we used to go up there. So that's the reason there are no Lindersons, and my father had 1 daughter. So that's the reason that you don't see any Lindersons around. We went to Sweden a few years ago, and I know Marie Quick told me, now don't be disappointed. When you get over there, you'll find out that your name was changed, and it wasn't Linderson. Well, I wrote to the House of Immigrants over there, and they sent me a very nice letter and told me, yes, your grandfather was, and your great-grandfather was Anders Linderson, and he was a shoemaker and a farmer, and the family is still here. And you go to a certain cemetery, it was at Odensby, which is approximately near Kalmar, and we did. And my cousin and her husband went with us, and we just scattered out to find cemetery. Because over there, after you're dead 25 years, they take the bones and they're done. You've lost your lot. And if your name is there on a stone, that's true. That's true. If your name is still there, there's some family there, then you're there. So my husband was looking around, and he said, I found a Linderson. And he did, and there was also a bouquet of flowers there. So we went to the sexton in the church, and of course he didn't speak Swedish, and we didn't either, and he didn't speak, I mean, he did speak Swedish. We didn't. And he thought we were looking for the restroom. So he was very, very gracious. And he showed us the restroom. And so, well, anyway, we finally got it across to him. That wasn't what we wanted. And there was an antique store down the road that he told us to go to. So we went there. And the woman spoke a little Swedish, a little English. And she said, you wait a minute. There's someone upstairs that I want to come down. So the woman came downstairs. And she was a North African English woman. And she was from their house in government, and she had been engaged to this couple that owned the antique store, their son, who had been killed 2 or 3 years ago. So she had very fluent English. And we could communicate, and she communicated with the owner in the store, and they said there are some old people down in this home by the name of Linderson. So it just looks like it all worked out. And they took us out in the country to a man who'd been retired, and he would have been my second cousin. So it just looks like we were to make that trip to Sweden. So that was the reason that Billingsley certainly is not Swede, but Linderson is. And I'd like to say a little bit about way back in Lockridge. I was raised here and raised in the Lutheran Church. My mother was Catholic. And that reminds me of another story. And And she was raised in Mount Pleasant. She was a school teacher. So you know what it was to be Catholic in the olden days. That was a no. Well, the next thing was my mother said there'll be no Swede spoken in my home. She was Irish Catholic. So that was fine. My dad went to church, and once in a while he'd take my mother to church, you know, and that was fine. But my mother would really never break down and go to the Lutheran church for many, many years. And many of you know my mother. I can see a lot of you here smiling. My mother had a tremendous personality. Everybody really liked my mother. So I was raised in the Lutheran church. But she said, now what I've been through, you know, oh, poor me, you know, she said, you will not join that church until you're married. So I went to the Lutheran church all the time, and then I married this Methodist farmer out here. I told him I won't go out there unless you'll go to church and they get that road gravelled. Well, he did go to church, but they didn't gravel the road. But by the time he was gone, and I didn't see him for 2 years, he was gone 26 months during the war. I was glad to marry him when I got back, whether the road was graveled or not. But anyway, then we both joined the church together after that. But I've been going up there since I was about in Sunday school. And so anyway, I think that's... it's so different now, church. We used to have junior mission band, and of course the league was different. But we used to go downtown to the Baptist church on Sunday night. They had BYPU, Baptist Young People, and they had the best hymns. Well, you could just rattle off those hymns, you know, and they were such easy singing. And you know, our hymns are notoriously old and bad to sing, really. Sorry about that. I think I've played forever preacher in the 50 years I've been here. But anyway, really, we had a great time. And they met every week, but we only met once or twice a month, I forget. But we planned our activities together, and it was great. And then the Ladies' Aid Society went both places. It was a big deal. When the Lutheran Ladies' Aid had it, they all went. Even my mother went to that. Then we went to the Baptist church. My mother went there, too. We all went to the Baptist church. We all went to the Lutheran church. Frank Weston was a Baptist when I grew up with him. And, you know, it was wonderful. And they had more children and more kids than we did. And we had band concerts. We had ice cream socials. They used to string these Japanese lanterns. Kathleen, do you remember when they had those? These Japanese lanterns that were like an accordion, you know, and you'd fold them up. They hung them out on the west lawn. The parsonage was west of the church. And we had wonderful ice cream socials. So we really had a great time. I know the kids have a great time now. We had 3 daughters that were confirmed, went through school up there. No weddings there because we didn't have enough room. They had too many friends. And then we buried 1 daughter from that church. So that church to me is very good. I look back now at all my years here, and I went to college in Fairfield and have a lot of friends in Fairfield, and they used to say to me, why don't you come to town to go to church? Now sometimes I wonder, why didn't I? But, you know, I guess it's the roots. My roots came from New Sweden, and I didn't know any better. I just was always used to going to church here. But I think it's wonderful that we have hung together for so long, had a good time, and made wonderful friendships. Myrtle Engstrom covered all the glory years I think we had. That was my age, and the war was over, and it was great. So it's wonderful, and I appreciate all the people that have come today, and all these young people now that are keeping our church going, because we still have hopes of keeping going on and on. Thanks for coming.
I would like to echo some of the sentiments that were just spoken. As I hear these stories, a lot of memories come back. But I feel like I've always been the foreigner in the land because I came from Indiana. And neither Frank nor I had what you call roots with, you know, we weren't intermarried or married or cousins or anything like that, you know. So we just have sort of been on the outside looking in, and that was no one's fault. It just was a fact. But I can remember all the good times we had and hope that we had more. And for the fact that we had young children, and you know, I've always heard this story that, and maybe I shouldn't say it now, but Lockridge has always been sort of, you know, they look down their nose at us and everything, but they have no idea, or they're not really taking into consideration about the fact that our children have now gone out into the world, and they are members of other churches, and the teachings carry on. However, we don't have any young people anymore who are childbearing age, except one. And she just had a baby about 4 months ago. But you know, we cannot rely on Tammy to keep the church going. And I'm not so sure that some of these young folks over here are anxious to go it again, you know, another round. So we're going to have to do something. And we've all been praying very hard that maybe Lockridge would grow. You know, there is a Lockridge enhancement program that we are part of now. It was started by the, help me out, the Rural Ministries. Okay, the Lutheran World Institute. That's the secretary. She knows everything. She's just wonderful. But we started that in our church, and we've had meetings about that. As a consequence, we had other, even the Baptist people came over, and some of the other community people came over to these meetings. As a result, the Lockridge Enhancement Program has started, and we are helping the town get, what? We have it revitalized, you know, we're trusting God to send us a lot of people, young ones, so that we can start the cycle all over again. Whether it's in the cards or not, I don't know. That'll be up to God, I'm sure, and up to us who maybe will have an impact on the young people in the town. I don't know what else to say. Is there anyone else that would like to contribute? I see a hand, and I'm very happy to have you come, Bob. Before Bob says anything, I would like to tell you that Richard Thompson is taping, he taped last night's hymns, sing, and today's service, and also part of this luncheon. And so duplicate tapes can be made, and they can be ordered by leaving your name and address and telephone number up here at the front table if you are interested. Each tape will cost $15, and if you live out of town and want us to send it to you, each tape will be $18. And we hope some of you will order them. I think it'd be fantastic, a legacy to hand down to your family or keep it for your history. Bob?
I just want to reflect on a few things. This is a transplanted German that lives about 26 miles away from here in the town of Wayland. Happened to be where the carpenter came that built the parsonage. And I live in about a 920 population town that is probably 96% Mennonite. There's a few Methodists, and there's about 4 families of Lutherans. So we joined here about 12 years ago, and lot of people said to me, well, Washington's 10 miles away, Swedesburg's 6 miles away, Mount Pleasant's 18 miles away. Why did you come to Lockridge? And I think it was because of family. The congregation seems like family. I went to church in the town of Germanville and was there a long time. But it's great to be a part of the Lockridge congregation. I want to thank Bishop Haugen for coming down here and visiting. I just figured up today when you said 150 congregations in your domain. And so if he went to each congregation, he'd take him 3 years to get around to see everybody. So I think him being here today is a great thing, and I appreciate it, and give him another hand for taking time out to come to Lockridge. I got one amusing story to tell about Lockridge on a Sunday morning. It happened must have been about 8 years ago. One Friday evening, a bunch of us would always meet in a little gas station there in Wayland and just talk about what happened in Wayland for the week and what we thought was going to happen the next week. Well, anyway, we got to talking, and the gentleman that run the station, he said, why don't you come down to Sugar Creek Mennonite Church sometime? I said, well, would you let me deliver the sermon? And he said, well, I don't know about that, but he says, I'll bet you could. And I said, well, I got up and gave a message a couple different times, and 2 people that was there said, now, if you ever give a sermon, we'll guarantee that we'll be there in the front pew to hear you. Lo and behold, about 9 o'clock, Stan Kroll, who was president of the congregation at that time, and I think Stan remembers it, he called me up and he said, Pastor Elsie's father passed away, and we need somebody to give the message. He says, I'll take the liturgy, you take the message. I said, that's great. I said, I know we're going to have a couple of visitors on Sunday morning. So at 8 o'clock the next morning, I called this one gentleman, and I said, his wife answered, and I said, Mildred, is Bob there? And she said, yeah. I said, is the coffee pot on? She said, yes. I said, I'm going to be over at 8:30. Okay. Well, they happened to be clients of mine in my insurance business, so they didn't know what was up. And I walked in, she poured me a cup of coffee, and I says, guess what, Mildred? Bob's going to be in church tomorrow morning. Oh, she says, is that right? He's never went to church before in his life except for weddings and funerals. She says, how's that going to be? I said, well, he made a statement in front of about 20 people last night that if I ever gave a sermon, he was going to be in the front row to hear it. So I left, we visited a while, and I left and went back home, and he called my wife. He says, this can't be so. And she says, yes, it is. So on a Sunday morning at the Lockridge First Augustana Church, there was 2 people that made a statement in Wayland on a Friday night that if I was there, they'd be in the front pew. Well, they disappointed me a little bit. They didn't sit in the front pew. They sat in the back pew, but that was okay. They said afterwards they didn't want to make me nervous. So anyway, I thought that was kind of amusing that we did have a couple of visitors one time at our church that made a statement, and they did follow up on it. Thank you.
I know there are many more stories. And who are we pointing to?
I'm not going to get up again, but I will give you a drastic solution to the one view problem. The problem in the adult church in south central Nebraska was that I had 2 children in Sunday school. And there were the only 22 children that were in the area at the time. But in that church, they had the process of men sat on one side of the church, and the women sat on the other church. It was the other side of the church. Well, we got the cushions in one part of the church, and the men and the women started sitting together. When I came back for an anniversary, about 20 years later, they had 2 junior choirs.
There you go. Next Sunday, all the cushions are gone from the left side of the church. I don't think that'll work.
I was in class this week. You have to go to your own school.
Yeah. Thank you very much. If there are no more stories or reminiscences, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Bishop Hogan and his wife, I know it, Diane, and Pastor Fisher and his wife, Linda, for honoring us with their presence today. And they hold rather high office in the church. But that does not negate the fact that you are all wonderful children of God. And in God's eyes, there is no rank. There is only love. Goodbye.